Now you guys are probably curious, what bike would I choose if I could only pick one, the Delano Peak or the La Sal Peak? Which is the right bike for you? What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to another video here on our second channel. If you guys can hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, we're just gonna jump right into this video. Probably the most asked about question we get is, do we prefer the Fezzari Delano Peak or the Fezzari La Sal Peak? Now, if you didn't know, my girlfriend Hannah and I, we actually been riding for Fezzari for a little over a year now, and before that, we used to ride for Ibis. Before that, we did a ton of testing. We used to sell bikes in bike shops, and yeah, I feel like we've been on a ton of models. We were really stoked to start working with Fezzari last year. A lot of people can hop on them on solid price points, but the bike still rode insanely well. And we've actually been spending some time on both models as our primary mountain bikes, the Delano Peak and the La Sal Peak. If you follow us, we've done a lot of traveling over to Mexico, over to Asia, and then also a ton within the US. And we keep going back and forth between the Delano Peak and the La Sal Peak. Both are really awesome bikes. However, I feel like each of them has the perfect rider for them. And right now they're actually running a really awesome sale, which is why I wanted to make this video, because we have been getting a lot of questions which model we prefer. The sale, we're actually gonna hop right onto their website right now. The sale is really awesome. So basically both models right here, this is the La Sal Peak and this is the Delano, and the Delano Peak comp $34.99, as well as the La Sal Peak comp $34.99. And this is pretty insane because this is a full carbon bike, so the carbon frame, as well as top of the line DVO suspension. Now, looking at the Delano, that's gonna be the DVO Diamond fork, so it's a little bit more trail oriented fork with the Topaz in the rear, the new Topaz. And once again, this is DVO's top of the line suspension, which is pretty insane because carbon bike, top of the line suspension, and a 12-speed drivetrain on both bikes. Super solid bang for buck, and you have $300 off on each models right now, which is awesome. Hopping over to the La Sal Peak, the difference here, it's gonna be a similar build. However, you're gonna get the Onyx up front, which is definitely a more enduro style fork. I've spent time on both these because we do work with DVO suspension. I actually end up preferring, I would say, the Diamond for most riding, which is actually back here on the Delano Peak, because the Diamond, I feel like it's just a little bit better of a trail-oriented fork. So when we're doing a lot of traveling from zone to zone to zone, it's always tough to like hit super gnarly downhill trails. Like we were just in Florida for the last 2 to 3 weeks, and down there, even though we had our La Sal, I just felt like it would have been maybe a little bit nicer to be on the Delano down there. However, when we've been in California, we've had our Delanos, or like Mexico City when we were riding a lot of downhills, we had our Delanos when we were down there, and I feel like I preferred having the La Sal. So we're gonna break it in this video, Delano Peak versus the La Sal Peak. But once again, you guys, looking on their website and looking at both of these models, man, what a good deal. What a great time to be a mountain biker, $34.99. But yeah, let's get into the differences, who I think each bike is for, and which bike I would buy if I had to pick one right now for the next year. So let's get into it. So the first bike we're gonna start off with is the Delano Peak, because that was actually the first model we built up when we started working with Fezzari, and we had so much fun on that bike. We take it to Mexico, we took it all over the US, and we really put it through its paces, both on more cross-country style trails, cross-country flow trails, as well as super gnarly downhill trails, and I feel like it shined on both. The Delano Peak itself is a 135 mil rear travel bike with 150 mils of travel up front. It definitely can be considered a trail bike. However, one thing that I really did love about it is I felt like it punched so much higher than its weight. I just felt like it always had the ability to get me out of tricky situations, albeit I definitely had to be a little bit more careful than my line choice than with the La Sal. However, once again, you guys, in terms of a one bike do everything, I was definitely stoked on that thing. Breaking down how it climbed, that was another reason I was really stoked on it, is I felt like it was such a good pedaler uphill. I feel like with most Fezzaris, man, the pedaling position is so comfortable on them. I feel like the seat angles are dialed. You're nice and upright, and you're on top of that bottom bracket, so climbing steep stuff is a breeze. And I feel like Fezzari bikes tend to have a little bit more of an active suspension design, which is nice on the climbs because it feels like the bike is glued to the ground on those textile climbs. Now, it's not too active on the climbs where you feel like you have to reach for that lockout on the climbs. I actually never lock out my shock unless I'm on pavement, and I actually do ride pavement quite a bit with the mountain bikes, especially when we're overseas and we have to commute to the trailhead if we don't have a rental car. So yeah, I always like to have a little bit more of a well-rounded bike, because I mean, I still got to get to the trailhead, and then when I'm at the trailhead, I want to ride the gnarliest trails. And climbing, I was never disappointed on the Delano Peak. In terms of downhill on the Delano Peak, once again, very active suspension design, and also the key word with the Delano Peak, I feel like, is poppy. It was such a playful bike, but it also stayed very composed over the tech, and once again, definitely a little bit more on the active side. Now, once again, 135 mils of travel, and even though it does have an active suspension design, it definitely feels like 135 at the end of the day, especially when you start going faster and faster and the trail gets techier and techier. You do have to be a little bit more careful with your line choice than when you're talking about its bigger sibling, the La Sal, which is a 170 mil bike, and we'll touch on that in a little bit. However, there was never a time where I was like, man, I so bummed out and I wish I brought a bike with more travel, because I feel like for 95% of trails out there, that Delano Peak is such a good bike. And the other side of that spectrum is when you were on a more cross-country flow style trail, I feel like the Delano Peak still had a bunch of fun. You were able to utilize it more in a wide variety of situations. Once again, from that cross-country trail to that gnarly double black, you can have a good time on both trails and not really feel like you're on the completely wrong bike. So yeah, that was another thing that I really appreciate about the Delano Peak. Now, we're going to be moving on to the La Sal Peak here, because we've had a lot of time on the La Sal Peak, and we're still waiting to do a long-term review. However, that would require a lot of footage, and we have just been running into winter trail situations left and right. I feel like winter is a thing this year. Stay tuned for a long-term review on that. However, just a quick summary on that bike right now in terms of climbing. This is something that I feel like a lot of people get wrong. So the La Sal Peak, it's a 170 millimeter enduro bike, and I feel like a lot of people are quick to dismiss it when it comes time to climbing. However, I actually am blown away ride and ride again from the La Sal Peak. It is such a capable climber. Number one, I don't feel like there's a huge energy loss with that suspension, meaning that I don't feel like it's just bobbing all over the place. I feel like as soon as you get on the gas, the La Sal wants to climb, and it definitely hangs up there with more bikes that are in more of a trail bike category. So I'm continuously blown away by the pedaling efficiency on that bike. And then when it comes time for technical climbs, that thing is planted to the ground. If you can't make it up a technical climb on the La Sal Peak, that is definitely a rider thing. And I can't ever blame the bike if I can't make it up a climb, because it has such a comfortable pedaling seated position, as well as a more active suspension design to really keep that bike planted to the ground. So yeah, I'm continuously blown away by how that La Sal Peak climbs. With that being said, you definitely feel the 170 when you're in a more of a cross-country situation. So say you're looking for that pep in its step right off of the gas, so you stand up and you're starting to put that power down. That's where the Delano Peak definitely has the edge. The acceleration on the Delano Peak is definitely noticeably quicker than the La Sal Peak, where the La Sal Peak definitely shines on more technical climbing situations. When you take the La Sal Peak and the 170 mils of travel combined with that DVO Onyx fork, it is a insane combo. You can essentially just fly down a trail, not really care too much about your line choice, and been okay. There's actually been a few situations where I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? Because you're going so fast on that bike, it just inspires confidence. And you just last minute decisions, you're like, oh shoot, did I take the wrong line? And you're just flying through it, you survive. That bike has saved me time and time again. I'm blown away by how well it performs on the downhills. It's a super stable bike. It takes drops really well. It takes corners really well as well. And I constantly find it to be the perfect downhill position on it. I feel like it has that downhill bike feel when I'm standing up and I'm going on that downhill, but at the same time, it still has a little bit of a pop to where I feel like I can still play around on the trail. And I really do feel like it's a really well-rounded enduro bike. Now, going back to trade-offs, it is a little bit on the longer side. So on those more tighter, twistier downhills, even on like some double black trails, like when the going gets super steep and tight, I would actually say the Delano Peak has a little bit of an edge there, just because I feel like I have a little bit more control from the front end. The La Sal Peak, especially on an extra large frame that I'm actually rocking, talking, it's definitely a lot of wheelbase. Now, it's still doable, and I still think I would prefer the La Sal Peak, especially on those more hairy style trails. However, that Delano Peak also is able to take those trails and you get a little bit more control there as well. So yeah, definitely picking and choosing when it comes to both. Now, you guys are probably curious, what bike would I choose if I could only pick one, the Delano Peak or the La Sal Peak? Which is the right bike for you? And I would say if you're that rider that you're looking for that one bike to do everything, like you have a cross country side to you, that you like to go on those more cross country style trails, but at the same time you want to be able to take that trip to the bike park, I think that Delano Peak is a really good universal bike. It does well in all types of environments. You can also set it up differently, so you can still put a beefier style fork on there and beefier style tires and take that thing to the bike park, but at the same time you can just lighten it up, put some like Recon tires on there and put a lighter weight fork, maybe even drop it to 140 and have that be a more cross-country style setup. So you kind of have flexibility there, but also if you want to do what I do, and I just set it at the 150, 135 with Minion 2.5s, and I just run standard 3C tires, no downhill casing to shave a little bit of weight there. I feel like that is the ultimate one bike to do everything setup. I can show up anywhere and be stoked that I'm riding my bike. I don't have to worry that, oh man, this whole trail system is green and there's no tech at all. I'm still gonna have fun on that bike. And at the same time, if we show up somewhere and it's double black trails, I can still handle myself. I might take certain features a little bit slower than I would if I had the La Sal. However, it's that one bike to do everything perfectly. Now, the La Sal Peak, I would say definitely confuses people, because on paper you're looking at a 170 millimeter 29er and you're like, man, that bike is just going to be good in bike parks. And I actually think that's not true. I feel like the La Sal Peak is the perfect bike for that rider that's looking for that one bike quiver, but is not going to be doing a cross-country race anytime soon. I definitely feel like if you look on that extreme of the spectrum, like cross-country racing or fully cross-country style trails where like the whole network is green, maybe a couple of blue trails if you're looking on the trail map, and no like a black or double black trail to be seen, I would say at that point, yeah, the La Sal is probably not the right bike for you. However, if you love climbing, you love big days in the saddle, and you love tech, that La Sal Peak climbs so well that I would probably, if I had like an all-day epic planned, I would actually reach for the La Sal, because I know I'm gonna have so much fun on the downhills. It's still poppy and playful, but it has a more downhill style feel down. And it's still such a good climber that I'm gonna have a good time on that bike. Especially with that rear Topaz. That new Topaz by DVO is insane. It's kind of like an air shock and a coil shock had a baby. But yeah, I would say very impressed with that. So yeah, if you're looking for one bike to do everything but XC, go La Sal. That's my personal opinion on that. What do you guys think? Let us know in the comment section. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to reach out or drop them in the comments. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button too to not miss out on any future videos. And what bike would you choose? I'm curious. Would you choose the La Sal Peak or would you choose the Delano? With that being said, my name is Mo Awesome and we'll catch you in the next video. Till next time, you guys, ride awesome. Phew.